is a very complex environmental problem.
It's going to be very difficult to fix this.
It spreads so widely.
There are severe risks if society will not tackle this.
It's a bit like climate change.
We need very concrete actions.
This is something we have to deal with the next generations.
We live in a take, make, waste society. We take huge amounts of materials and energy from the earth to make our millions of products. This generates huge amounts of waste. We've grown accustomed to lots of goods and simply replacing them when they break down or go out of fashion.
The average European consumes 16 tonnes of material and generates 6 tonnes of garbage every year. This waste is unmanageable. Landfills are filling up, incinerators are burning valuable commodities and creating hazardous waste. A great deal of this waste enters the ecosystems of the world, including our oceans and seas.
Are fish and shellfish ingesting bits of our plastic bags? What happens when we eat that seafood?
We can change individual behaviour by simply not littering. But can we imagine a system of production and consumption that provides us with a world without marine litter? Marine litter is complex and it's closely associated with other ecological and economic problems. In this film, we're going to be taking a look at the work of an ambitious group of researchers who want to tackle these difficulties. We'll take a look, first of all, at the causes of marine litter and what actions we should take. And we'll be asking what mix of policies and measures is needed to overcome these difficulties.
In 2012, a group of European researchers became fascinated by the complexity and urgency of the marine litter issue. They created an interdisciplinary project called CleanSea, funded by the European Union. They imagined a sea free of litter and wanted to work towards that.
In the CleanSea project, we're interested in understanding where all this litter is going and what kind of impact it's having on the marine environment, but also on us and society and the economy. We're also interested in figuring out what we can do about it. So we brought together this team, which includes natural and social scientists, but also fishermen and waste managers, an NGO, and a network of coastal communities. And together we tried to tackle this problem from all these different perspectives. It's a big problem and we needed a big team. And we really wanted to think about marine litter in new ways that hadn't been thought about before.
CleanSea needed facts and scientific data with which to inform the political debate and find a way forward. They first wanted to understand what's in marine litter and how marine organisms are exposed to it. To do this, they decided to focus on the natural world.
The seabeds they surveyed in the North and Black Seas were strewn with hundreds of thousands of bottles, cans, packaging, textiles, fishing gear, cigarette ends, and in some cases, entire garbage bags of waste that had gone overboard. Well over half of the marine litter items were made out of durable plastics.
Researchers studied how plastic breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces of plastic by creating an experimental tank filled with seawater, marine organisms, and of course, plastic litter. They found that the pieces of plastic soon became covered in a thick layer of bacteria and algae, and some began to decompose.
Over a short period, from a few months to a year, large plastic items started to weaken, and that released tiny particles called microplastics. And once micro-sized, material decomposition is a very slow process. Too slow, in fact, for the researchers to be able to measure it. Another group studied microplastics at sea. Microplastics were found in the seawater and were especially abundant in estuaries and coastal areas. Surprisingly, they were also discovered in very concentrated quantities in the sediment. Studies have shown that much of the floating litter ultimately sinks down onto the seafloor. every teaspoonful of sediment collected contained microplastics. The survey also examined sea life. It was hard to find a species that was unaffected by microplastics. Over 80% of all samples researchers examined, from brittle stars to oysters to seabirds, had microplastics in their bodies.
The problem is they are not decomposing, they are falling into small parts and pieces, getting into the food web, and very important, they are of poisonous character, they are toxic due to the additives they are having, and they are now getting into sediments, and it's incredible what scientists during the last years have found in the sediments. Even here in our CleanSea projects, we are quite astonished how much and how big the amount of plastics is in our environment.
The researchers saw that litter acts as a sort of ferry boat for risky bacteria and invasive species. Bacterial pathogens on board the litter can create human health hazards, and invasive species can impact marine life. Another finding was with algae at the very base of the marine food web. Algae are negatively affected by plastic microlitter. The good news is it only happens when the particles are very small and highly concentrated. One step up in the food chain appears more vulnerable. Researchers used ecosystem modelling to predict that microplastics cause up to 10% reduction in zooplankton biomass. That's a signal that our marine ecosystems could be at risk.
We investigated the effects of nanomicroplastics on the fertilization rates of sea urchins. So you can extract the sperm and the eggs from sea urchins and have them fertilized, and if you expose them at the same time at these plastic particles, you can actually investigate the effects. And we found a significant effects on the fertilization rate. For me, this is the most important of the whole marine litter issue, is what about these very small particles? We look at an iceberg here, in my opinion, you know, we see only the tip. We can't see what's happening in there with the very small particles. And these are potentially the hazardous particles. They can cause inflammation, they can cause all sorts of... They evoke an immune response, in fact. And they cause cell damage, oxidative stress, cell damage, cell death in some cases.
We know that marine litter adversely affects marine wildlife and ecosystems. But what sort of impact does it have on us? What are the economic and social causes and costs of marine litter? Well, these questions were for the social scientists on the team.
In Barcelona, we have collaborated with the Port Authority in order to sample what they have collected in terms of waste during one day. We have learned that in one day we can collect up to 2,000 items of litter from all different kinds of sources, not only from maritime sources, but also from land, and that represents more than 100 kilos of waste.
We've done choice experiments in Bulgaria, Greece, and the Netherlands, which show that people are willing to pay significant amounts to prevent that type of litter on the beach. If you would add it for the whole of Europe, probably reach a multi-billion euros figure in terms of damage alone to the well-being of people who are visiting the beach. A sector like fisheries is at stake, which is already a 7 billion euros sector in Europe. If people lose their trust in fish as a healthy product, they will be seriously affected. So there's a lot of economic sense in investing more in litter prevention.
It turns out that marine litter is a textbook example of a major market failure, with costs for Europe alone running into billions of euros. Many countries and communities are, however, experimenting with financial incentives and public-private cooperation as ways of reducing marine litter.
One of the measures under discussion right now is the establishment of deposit and return systems for fishing boxes. We need economic incentives so those items don't end up into the environment. There are too many products that are designed to be dumped. We need to give waste a value so it does not enter our seas and oceans.
In the UK, the supermarkets participate in the Courtauld Commitment, and this is an initiative by the British government in collaboration with large supermarket chains. The objective is to minimize waste throughout the retail chains. All the major supermarket chains participate in this initiative. It's now spread beyond the boundaries of the UK. When you show that change is possible, and you have the biggest players in the market, then things can happen.
Harnessing the power of business and industry for eco-design and circular economy has not been high on the European decision-makers' agenda, but things are beginning to happen. So far, though, the focus has been on raising awareness, cleaning up litter and waste collection.
In the CleanSea project, we were surprised to identify a large number of voluntary initiatives that aim to address the marine litter problem across Europe. So in total, we identified 134 of them. While the majority of the initiatives focuses on clean beaching activities, we were particularly interested in those that try to address the root of the problem. And they do that, for example, through technological innovations, like edible packaging, or they do it through reintroducing to society some norms, such as sharing products, like rather than throwing them away, or repairing stuff.
Marine litter is a political problem, and the conflict here is that many people want a clean sea, but politically speaking, we're dragging our feet. We do have policies. Our research has shown that there are policies in place, like the waste policy, landfill, eco-design, packaging, and we also have a marine strategy. And these strategies are good for addressing marine litter, but they're not always implemented fully, and that would need to happen. We can also strengthen all of these directives with more specific attention to how to reduce marine litter, including marine litter reduction targets. And we can start to do this by, for example, using those R's that we all know, the reduce, reuse, and recycle. And we can add redesign and repair and remanufacture to that. And this is what we call the circular economy. It's a regenerative, toxic-free way of producing and consuming goods. And it's powered by green energy. So I really think that this is a no-regret approach to reducing marine litter, even if we only take out the toxics. It's already a huge step towards a cleaner sea.
It's a question of common will. It is not only on the hands of our environmental authorities to resolve the problem of marine litter. We need to involve all other public and private sectors and the population at large, because we are all co-responsible on the problem, and we all need to be in the solution. The roots of the problem are deep in our system, and we will need brave and unpopular policies to address it. And when we think of those, they feel impossible to implement and maintain, but it is not the case. After a while, we get used to it, and it seems impossible to think and imagine it has ever been different. As an example, the smoking ban. Someday eco-design will be the rule, and not the exception.
Eradicating marine litter in our lifetime will take what you can think of as a whole tree of ideas and actions, from the little leaves in the upper canopy right down to actions that address some of the deep roots of the marine litter problem.
The leaves high in the tree can be seen as symptom relief actions like beach cleanups and putting filters on washing machines to keep microplastics out of wastewater. There are individual consumer choices to reuse shopping bags and reduce waste. We have branches with technological innovations like biodegradable plastics and apps that tell you which personal care products contain microplastics. On bigger branches, there are voluntary agreements like the green deals in the fisheries and shipping sectors, and economic incentives that prevent marine litter closer to the source. Recycling targets, eco-design and green public procurement are important branches that help us become resource efficient. Giving structure at the base are circular economic business models powered by renewable energy and business knowledge sharing platforms. Down at the roots is where more radical social and political innovations, participatory governance, and better attention to our human values can transform our systems and the deeper driving forces behind marine litter. Without roots and a strong trunk, the upper branches are limited in their actions to help our marine ecosystems.
It is quite easy to identify end-of-the-pipe solutions, but we need to address the sources, the origin, and sometimes it is not easy to see where it starts. So we also need a set of general measures to decrease the amount of waste we generate. And if we do that, we will decrease the amount of litter that enters our environment.
A lot of practices that undermine the take-make-waste economy are already in place. These aim to alter our production and consumption patterns into ones which are less consumerist and more regenerative. Schemes like deposits on fish boxes and reusable water bottles. Green energy systems are having a huge impact on how products are designed, as well as reducing the environmental cost of how goods are transported. And some social movements are encouraging a move away from consumerism towards a simpler lifestyle.
The question how to overcome these problems point into the direction of what Jared Diamond wrote in his famous book Collapse. He was saying that that when you are looking at civilizations who have disappeared, given these type of problems, that they in all those cases they saw the problem coming by science or whatsoever. But the older generation with their vested interests prevented always the younger generation to timely adapt. And that is the general rule we are facing here. I think that we'll overcome these problems as soon as they have become so bad that the general public is facing small catastrophes. And then they are willing, via the democratic system, to make big steps. The problem of marine litter has to be solved in many ways. There has to be environmental policies in place, that's for sure. But we also have to face the fact that the economy as such is a problem in which short-term shareholders are determining where the economy is going. And we also have to face the fact that the financial system is now making the choices in society where we are going.
We need to acknowledge the role of governments behind all of these initiatives, and we need to ensure a level playing field across different countries. This is very important because you may have the best ambitious practices in one country, but then all the polluting activity is going to move to the next country. So you don't solve the problem if you only have a few examples of ambitious practices somewhere. Governments should create a common framework for everyone on the basis of at least minimal agreed standards of how clean we want our environment to be. Within this framework, then the industry can try to go beyond. The standards should be set by the governments.
Marine litter is clearly a major concern, and people are beginning to realise it. In Europe, the call is for innovations that will find sustainable solutions to today's environmental problems. With the right mix of human ingenuity and political will, we can solve them. We can create approaches and policies that will protect this threatened ecosystem, not only now, but on into the future.
We've made some significant progress, and I think it's important now to keep this momentum going. And things are starting to change. We can meet venture capitalists nowadays who are only interested in investing in the circular economic businesses. And they want to be first movers and have the first mover advantage. I think also people are ready for a change. We're ready to welcome more technological innovations, certainly, but also political and social innovations. And I think it's not going to be very easy, but I think it can be done.
We can't live without our oceans. We have to protect them. We have to keep them healthy. Governments, researchers, shareholders, consumers, children, everyone has a stake in eliminating marine litter.
you.